Good evening and welcome to Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. This day we look at the achievements of the NRM. They say it's not an ordinary change, but it's a fundamental change. 38 years later, what are the gains? What are the shortcomings? Do they translate to the economy? Do they translate to the governance of this country? But furthermore, do they translate to you as an ordinary Ugandan? The scorecard is out and we want to be able to look and take a deep dive into this discussion in these areas that came from a 10-point program to 4 principles there. We'll discuss those achievements that were talked about by the president, but we'll also go further to discuss the retreat and what is happening there. Today, I have a full house here. Before I introduce the full house, you can be part of the show. Go to our YouTube channel, let us know what you think, or our X platform, hashtag UBC Behind the Headlines, and you can let us know what you think there. The number 0709 60 25 92 is both text and WhatsApp. Drop your comment there and let us know. Let me introduce the panel today. On my immediate left, Professor Sarah Sali, the Dean at the School of Gender and Women's Studies at Makerere University. She's with us this evening. Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, our viewers.
First time hosting him here on Behind the Headlines, made an appearance here, Dr. Honorable Crispus Chionga, a National Resistance Movement historian. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, my brother.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
I only saw you from afar, and now seeing you up close, you look younger. Next to him is no stranger to this show, a senior citizen in this country, Honorable Captain Francis Edward Babu is with us today. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, and thank you for inviting us. And I'm welcoming also my colleagues who are on this panel.
Yes.
And would like to greet everybody. You know, I told you nowadays I greet everybody in all the languages.
Yes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesu asifiwe.
So you've greeted everyone.
Finished.
I thought you'd go through all the languages across.
No, the two languages I'm using here is Arabic and Swahili, which are the common languages around East Africa.
Okay, we'll go with that. Next to him is Honorable Captain Mike Mukula, who is the Vice Chairperson, Eastern Region for the National Resistance Movement, but a businessman too. Good evening, sir.
It's a pleasure to be hosted on UBC. I'm exceedingly humbled and profoundly honored.
Thank you thank you for making the journey to be with us here today.
Thank you.
Also online, or should I say people that are transiting from Chankwanzi to here, I have the Right Honorable Richard Todong, the Secretary General of the National Resistance Movement, who is also with us. I said I have a full house today. I also have Dr. Chris Baryomunsi, who is the Minister, Cabinet Minister for ICT and National Guidance, but also in turn the Vice Chairperson, Western Region for the National Resistance Movement. I also have the Deputy Secretary General, Madame Rosemary Namayanja there. I also have Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, National Chairperson of the Women's League. That is the full panel I have on their side. Good evening, and it's good to have you.
Good to have you. Good to have you. Good to have you.
Good evening, and thank you, Timothy, for hosting us. We are here in Chankwanzi. You can see we are ready for the show.
Concerned by the dressing?
Good evening, viewers and listeners. It is a pleasure for me to be here tonight. My name is Emmanuel Lumala Dombo, Director for Information at the NRM Secretariat. And it's a pleasure for me to be here and broadcast from the Chankwanzi Leadership Institute.
Good evening, viewers, and good evening, everyone on the panel. It's a great pleasure for us to be here with the team that side, and we hope we shall have a great show.
Good evening, viewers and our listeners. I'm Lydia Wanyoto Mutende. I'm also here in Chankwanzi, ready for the show. Thank you.
I would like to start with condolences to the Right Honorable Richard Todong, who lost a brother. Our condolences, our heartfelt condolences go out to him and his family, especially in this grieving time. And all of us as panelists and the ones who are out there speak to that. Let's get to it immediately and be able to discuss some of the things that are there. And I think it's only befitting that I start with Honorable Mukula that is with me here in the studio. Looking at the president last week on Friday celebrating 38 years of the NRM and the president, and he was, I can quote him verbatively saying, these are not just my achievements as a president, they're also the NRM's. When you look at the celebrations on Friday, what were you celebrating?
I think first of all, President Museveni is a revolutionary leader. And being a revolutionary leader, he is accompanied in this struggle or in this revolution by revolutionaries. And there are many young people who have joined him in the struggle. And I want to say that the National Resistance Movement is an organization which is about transformation and is anchored on the four key pillars, which is primarily patriotism, anchored on patriotism, Pan-Africanism, social economic transformation, and democracy. And we are deepening democracy in the country. Now, we celebrate fundamental achievements. And if you do recall, in 1986, on the floor of Parliament of Uganda, President Museveni said, this is not a mere change of guard. I think this is going to be a fundamental change.
Yes.
And to hold power for 38 years, we celebrate many things. One, that by 1986, when the National Resistance Movement took over power, the whole country was a failed state. And I want to say that you want to liken it to Somalia. And now, one of the key things the National Resistance Movement and President Museveni has focused on has been pillar number one, infrastructure number one, if I want to call it, which has been peace and security. Because all the other fundamentals cannot prevail if you don't have peace and stability. And by 1986, we had 14 fighting groups which were attempting to overthrow the constitution and the stability of this country. And what am I saying? By 1986, we had FOBA, and the National Resistance Movement has fought in the last 38 years and defeated 14 major fighting groups. FOBA, Force Obote back again. You have UPA in Teso, Uganda People's Army. You had Juma Oris, West Nile Bank Front Part 2. You had Bamuze, Uganda Rescue Front Part 2. You had the father of Alice Lakwena. You had Alice Lakwena, what you call the Holy Spirit movement in the north, which fought all the way up to Jinja here, and they were defeated in your area when they crossed over to Kenya. You had Itongwa here. Itongwa had Chirimutu. In the areas of where Dr. Kionga comes from, you had NALU, National Army for the Liberation of Uganda, which eventually formed an alliance with now what you call the Salaf Muslims, and you have what you call ADF, the Allied Democratic Forces. You also had Kony, who fought government for over 23 years. And he was rolled like a carpet to Central African Republic, 2,000 kilometers, never to come back again. You had the Karamojong, who had an estimated number, Dr. Kionga, the former Minister of Defense will tell you, an estimated number of close to 80,000 guns. Those have all been de-appetized and disarmed from the Karachunas of the gun culture. So what am I saying? The country now from the north to the south, east to the west, is peaceful. We're now dealing with the renegade forces of ADF deep inside Congo. And that is not a mean exercise. So what am I saying? The pillar number one, infrastructure number one, peace and stability has been attained, not by going in by prayer, but sweat and blood. This has been a very, very protracted struggle. When you talk about the other gains, like the areas of that we have had, when you talk about patriotism, when you talk about Pan-Africanism, when you talk about socio-economic transformation, you will see that the country has had fundamental changes in the social economic front. Look at it this way. By 1986, as you do realize, we had a population of about 14 million people. Today we have a population closing on to 50 million people. What does it mean? The majority of the population is below the age of 30, 80%. What does that mean to the country? Most of them have free universal primary education. You have free universal secondary education. Very few countries in the African continent have pursued that direction. When you look at health services, you have free universal health services from health sector 1 all the way up to the national service in a national hospital in Malago. This, as you can see, the country has now been able to defeat, Dr. Kionga will tell you this, we've been able to realize fundamental gains by when Dr. Kionga was there, you do recall, Uganda had the worst endemic case of HIV and AIDS in the not just in the African continent, globally, at about 30%. Under the national resistance movement, that was reduced to 6.1, and now we are much lower than that.
Okay.
I could go on and on. These are gains that we've had, which are glaring for everybody. Some people have, they say in the Bible, they have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. These are the fundamental gains, and many more that the national resistance movement under General Museveni that has been registered in the country.
Thank you very much, Captain Mike Mukula. Let me come to Honorable Crispus, especially being that in 1980 you won elections and you were a member of parliament, you didn't go to parliament, you decided to go to the bush. When I come to you, why did you decide to go to the bush with UPM instead of really consolidating what you had then?
Thank you, but before I address that question, I just wanted to supplement what my brother Honorable Mukula has said, particularly about re-establishing security and peace in our country. He has very well outlined the insurgencies that NRA, UPDF fought for a long time. I think what is important to note is that all these struggles against the negative reactionary forces were fought purely by Ugandans. In many countries, when you face such challenges, they will call upon the UN to come and help, or even other countries. But Uganda handled these insurgencies on its own capacity. Now, going to your question, yes, in 1980, that was 2 years after I left medical school, I decided to participate in the elections that time. And yes, I won a seat, but the circumstances I went through told me that things were not well in the country. Starting with Kasese, many of the candidates that had wanted to participate in the elections were criminally disqualified by the then Electoral Commission, which was being commanded by the late Paulo Muanga, who was chairman of the Military Commission. In Kasese, there was one brother of mine, brother in the sense that we were age mates, who was not even a candidate, but was like a reserve in case some of his colleagues in the Democratic Party were hurt or were not available. He was at call to fill the gap. This brother was captured from his hotel room by an operative of the UPC then, given to terrorists in the bush, and we received him as a dead body. I also followed events elsewhere in Uganda. For example, we used to have a brother called Okwenje. I think he was from Busia. He stood for elections in his home area. He got defeated. He came running to Kampala to report to the UPC headquarters that he had lost elections. Instead, he was told, who has told you you lost? You have your seat. So he was allocated a seat, although he had failed at the ballot. So it was clear to me that things were not yet fixed in Uganda. To go to that parliament was going to be a waste of time. And indeed, it's not, I refused to go, but my colleagues in the DP went. I think there were over 40 DP MPs, stayed there from 1981 up to 85. But they never made a difference.
They crossed the floor.
Some crossed, yes. Some crossed. So it was going to be a waste of time to go to that parliament with that formation. And our leader then, Chairman Museveni, who had worked with UPC, with the Obotes from Tanzania, he used to tell us at public rallies that if UPC cheats elections, we should prepare to fight. And indeed, that's what happened, hence our pathway.
Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Crispus Jong. Honorable Babu, some of the things mentioned by the President, especially when was the 38 years were being celebrated, were security for all, mass immunization, education for all, prosperity for all, land security, controversies there from the CA and the Land Act there, freedom of worship, consolidation of the ESC market, defeat corruption, and foreign agencies. When you put a scorecard against this, what would you rate it in 38 years?
Oh, thank you very much. This conversation is actually interesting. I'd like to thank my two colleagues who have talking about. These are the questions you should ask. After all these problems they went through, after all our people we buried in the Royal Triangle, after all the problems, how are they behaving now? Some of our people. Do anybody have any remorse that where we are today, a lot of people lost their lives? There was a lot of fighting, and some of them still are happy to continue spoiling what is there. Your question now brings me to what you've just said. When you sent me the poster for coming here, there were two words. One was legacy and accountability. Today, all the things they have described to you are right. And actually, people went through them. If the past makes the present, nobody seems to be thinking about that past. And a lot of our people have taken completely a different route. And that's why the president stood up and talked about those issues. And he keeps on saying the right thing. But it seems like it passes over our heads. This government has got fantastic programs. And if those programs were actually implemented, this country would be at a different level. Now, first and foremost, even before we get to the president, I am sorry, I am extremely unhappy with our elite. The elite of this country are supposed to help to try and get this country to another level. It is the elite who can craft the state. The state crafting requires people who have got the ability to do so. And a man like Lee Kuan Yew, after going to China and came back, and also the Prime Minister of China told him the three words. One of them were meritocracy, the other one was pragmatism, and the other one was honesty. With all those things that you've just heard, and if we are honest to our country, after going through all that, we should be very, very clear on where we want our country to go. So the president is right when he talks about corruption and talks about people not implementing the programs of government. He's right. The question is, what has gone wrong? Why is it that we get our village heroes and make them run a state? A state is run by people who have got the ability to do so. And this is where I now start saying there is something very wrong. If patronage of getting people to go into positions for the sake of going into positions, and they are not on the level of statecraft, then we must think twice. Somebody who has no remorse at all, what Honorable Mukura has talked about, what Honorable Kionga has been talking about, when you talk about it now, it sounds like a joke. It is not. People lost their lives to get us where we are now. And it is this that annoys some of us. By the way, some of us did not join those words you're using, NRM, I don't know what. I joined a revolution to change this country to a better country. Those nomenclatures you're using came because they wanted to fit in the society they found here. The revolution was very clear. We were trying to put this country right. What Honorable Kionga was talking about, people losing their seats, being people killed, and so on and so forth. But when we've got there, we now have a slightly different problem. The problem is we have been diverted from the revolution. And it's that diversion that we've got to talk about. Whether we go to Chankwanze, whether we go anywhere, if we don't stop and have a mindset change and stop being greedy and stop playing with this country, we are playing with fire. Because there's a total disconnect between the elite and those who are in government and the population. We need to connect with our people. We need to connect with the younger people who are there. Because the younger people, you're not going to tell them these stories. They're not interested. What they are interested in, why are you making wrong things now? Why are you corrupt? Why do you lose 10 trillion shillings a year? Why are people stealing? Why is it no longer this corruption word, but it's got powder on it? This is looting at an industrial scale. Who are these people? So, if you want to discuss, and discuss very carefully, what has gone wrong with all these good things that were done by our people who ended up dying, and some of us are growing old, and we are telling them these things happened because Young and me, we know where we've come from. The question is, the questions which are being asked now, you can tell us whatever you want, but what you're doing now is not right. And it is that area that we must think about right now very seriously. Now, you cannot take state power.
Let me ask Captain Francis Babu. You talk about elitism, you talk about government, you talk about the disengagement there. But the three of you, Honorable Crispus, yourself, Honorable Mike Mukula, what have you passed on to this generation you're calling elite?
Oh, there are many things we've passed on. First of all, the elite young people who are out there, who are asking these questions, are our children. And the foundations which were laid after this struggle you're hearing about has produced them and has made, including yourself. It is because of this struggle that you're sitting in that chair now. It's because of this struggle that we have so many television stations. It's because of this struggle that we have so many universities. It is because of this struggle that we have a lot of things that have been established in this country. It is because of this struggle that we are now asking questions. And nothing would happen to you if you ask those questions. It is, those things have been passed on by a team, not one person. And that's what the president was telling you. He called it NRM, but it's a team of people who were out there, who passed this on and would like to see these things being done. And he said, with myself and the people who struggle to get this country here, we are not going to allow this to continue, what is happening now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
That's extremely important.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me bring in Professor. I'll be getting to the team that is out there. Professor, let me give my personal opinion, and then you can respond. My daughter is about 7, 8.
Yeah.
So recently I was telling her, eat your food, the hungry people in Somalia. And she asked me a question. If I eat this food, will the people in Somalia get food? The question I'm putting to you, when I looked at the preliminary results of the census, 0 to 17 is 50.5%. 18 to 30 is 22%. About 75% of this population is under 30. They hardly know what these people are talking about. How significant are these gains to any of this biggest population in this country? And where is the disconnect?
Yeah, thank you very much, Timothy. Actually, the gains are big. First of all, I appreciate all the colleagues in the House and what they have said. And whatever they have said is true, because we have stayed, the NRM has been around long enough for people to go through those things or to experience those things right from the 1980s. So each one has experienced these things differently, and it's very, very important. And it's also true that the younger people may not be connecting very well, and maybe it's the frustration that comes around with the elite that these things have not been passed on. So you're asking, where is the disconnect? I think the disconnect could be mainly in two ways, or maybe three. One is how consistently is this information passed on? I remember in the past, maybe once, not so long ago, the NRM produced the legacy publication, but it was a one-off, okay? If such thing, and you know when you read the legacy publication, you read about the different mottos or mantras that have driven every campaign and every 5-year cycles. National transformation, the transformation of the military, infrastructure development, wealth creation and job creation, and so many things. So I think there's a disconnect between that passing on. It's like an ideological question of what do we pass on, what do we stand for, why did the NRM come to power, and how do we ensure that this is sustained within that. But I think the other disconnect is that we have over-amplified the political question vis-a-vis other kinds of questions. You know, you can look at the legacy just from the tangibles, things like, okay, there's infrastructure, and also things like, okay, we have a lot of democracy, because every 5 years we have this played out to us. But there's an interesting author, Amartya Sen, who writes Development as Freedom, who comes up actually with the 5 C's, and mainly his theories, his approach is the capabilities approach. So what capabilities have been played around, have been enabled so that people can actually have freedom to make certain choices? It's interesting you started the question by talking about your child, eat your food. Because one thing that Amartya Sen speaks about is the difference between fasting and starving. A person who is starving does not have a choice because does not have food. A person who is fasting has food, but makes certain decisions not to eat, either for health or religious purposes. So in Development as Freedom and in articulating the 5 capabilities, what Amartya Sen is talking about is, if we are to look at development beyond simply giving people money, can we look at development with regard to what has what opportunities people are being given, so that they can make choices, either to not to starve or to fast instead of to starve. Because the person who is starving doesn't have a choice. A person who is fasting has a choice to eat or not to eat. So most of the times when we make evaluations of legacy and accountability to states or to ruling parties like this, we tend to focus on the political question. But I think the other thing we could interest ourselves is what capabilities has the NRM made possible, okay? Of course, Sen talks about the capability to survive and act. That's where we started from, about peace and security, so that people can leave home and go to work, and leave work and go home. We are going to leave here very late, and we are all sure we are going to reach home safely. So that's about the capability to survive. But also the capability to generate development. And here you're talking about the different developmental programs that have come on board. And earlier, I mean, many times they have said our problem is largely around documentation and record keeping. There are many people, I mean, if we were to look at the state of the economy, I know there are some things which are not going right, but also there are many opportunities which have been created in terms of jobs, in terms of new industries, in terms of just providing power, and people can sell their goodies up to night time. But also there are the direct government developments like any national development plans and PDM and those things that are putting money directly into people's pockets, and agro-industrialization and the rest. There's also the capabilities to self-renew, capabilities to relate. I mean, Kampala is, for example, ranked as East Africa's social capital because it doesn't sleep. But it is people are relating like that because there's a capability to survive and act. Okay? Then, of course, to achieve coherence, where we should be looking at how do we sustain this. And now this comes to what Captain Francis Babu was saying. How can the elite ensure sustainability of these things? So it's true people actually had a bad past. And the younger children may not know this because this story is not being told enough. But it is because certain capabilities to feel free to choose to even participate politically or not participate politically have been enabled that actually they can choose not to know where they are coming from. When we were younger, listening to the news was compulsory in families. Why? Because you were not sure that government would be there the following day, so that you go to school or you don't go to school. But today, I mean, people can survive without necessarily listening to the news because there are certain things which are guaranteed. But they are guaranteed because someone is doing something somewhere. The government is doing something somewhere to guarantee them. So when we evaluate states largely from the political question alone and democratic freedoms, sometimes we forget to look at the other things which are being enabled for us to be able to ask those questions. And of course, beyond capabilities, the other things that Sen Amatia talks about is the whole aspect of agency. Okay? What opportunities do you have to act in your self-interest as an autonomous human being? And maybe these are the things which were not there when these three gentlemen were going to the bush, because people were being forced in certain directions from what we've had being recounted, especially by the Honorable Crispus Kionga. But I mean, today, people can choose. And that's why maybe the whole agenda of human rights is the biggest agenda in what people are doing, because I want my right to this and I don't want my right to that, and my right to this has to be guaranteed. But the point is, when you're looking at all these figures, even to your child who is talking, responding, that is responding, should be educated that he or she is able to have those opinions because the state is guaranteeing certain freedoms and certain capabilities which were not there in the past. So in simple terms, all I'm saying is that when we evaluate these processes, it's not enough just to speak about the political question, but also to look at the other economic and social interventions. I mean, we've not even gone into health and education and everything else, and gender equality and minority groups and inclusivity and diversity. There's a whole thing there. But to see what has been enabled, how do we participate in what has been enabled, and how do we leverage what has been enabled for us to further our humanity as human beings, but also development to enable us to survive another day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me switch to the team that is in Chankwanzi there, and I'll start with Dr. Chris Baryomunsi there. Dr. Chris, there is no doubt about the gains there, especially the ones that have been consolidated in areas of education. Honorable Mukula has talked about HIV. Security has been hinted on in all various forms. Education has been hinted on by Professor here. But when I come to you, what shortcomings has the NRM had, and what is being done about them in these 38 years?
In these 38 years.
Thank you very much, Timothy, and good evening, viewers. Once again, I want to thank fellow panelists, those who are here with me in Chankwanzi, and also those who are in the studio in Kampala. And before I come to the shortcomings, let me reinforce the points which have been raised by stating that we attained independence in 1962, but the 24 years between 1962 and 1986 clearly exhibited a failed post-colonial state of Uganda. And when the NRM came to power, it inherited a country which I would, in the medical language, equate to a patient who was unconscious and surviving on oxygen and steroids. And therefore, in the last 38 years, the NRM government has been trying to resuscitate and put back this patient to life. And when the president promised a fundamental change, indeed, a fundamental change has been realized, and we continue to realize it, because there are indicators which we use to measure quality of life. And indeed, from the several assessments which have been carried out over the years, including the last census which we are now analyzing, the quality of life indicators clearly show that we have made tremendous progress in many areas, and there is no doubt to that. Whether you speak of life expectancy at birth, which has now increased to 68 years, and it had fallen to as low as 43 years in the late 80s, early 90s. Whether you speak of maternal mortality ratio, which is a measure of women who die because of pregnancy and childbirth-related complications, it has fallen from 700 deaths per 100,000 live births now to 189. Whether you speak of infant mortality rate, which has moved from 122 to 36, under 5 mortality, I could go on and go on. Whether you speak about the economy, we have now entered into the lower middle income status, and so forth and so forth. So there is progress which is both measurable in terms of indicators, but also even to the naked eye examination, you can clearly see, for those who were there then and are still alive, to know that Uganda has undergone transformation and we are on the upward trajectory. But coming to your question regarding challenges, first of all, we must appreciate that we are doing all this on earth. We are not in heaven. And therefore, while we report progress and areas of success, there are also challenges. One of them is like what we are now discussing these days, which is the public domain, is the issue of corruption that has become a big challenge, not only in the government, but all actors in society, even the private sector, civil society, a question which we are dealing with. As we have already said, NRM stands for zero tolerance to corruption. And you all appreciate that, led by the president, we are now waged another phase of a war against corruption, because we would want whatever resources we have, whether we raise them through internal revenue collection or borrowing or whatever sources, this money must be translated into meaningful interventions aimed at providing services to Ugandans. The other challenge I could say is that in our democracy, I think we have a lot of liberalism, because our fourth pillar, ideological pillar, is democracy. I said we got independence in 1962, but in the 24 years between 62 and 86, those were 24 years, we had close to 10 presidents. We were changing presidents like the way we change clothes. Today I'm in green, tomorrow I can put on yellow, the other day white. And but we had turmoil, and the country bled and went on its knees. So one of the things where we have fairly succeeded is the return to democracy, where Ugandans are able to exercise their democratic right by choosing leaders of their choice. But I think there is a tendency also now to vulgarize the democratic space in Uganda. That when we allowed and agreed as Ugandans to go into multi-party politics, there are those who are pushing for radicalism and extremism, which is endangering our democracy, because democracy and the multi-party dispensation doesn't mean that we should get out of law and order. I see this as a challenge, that yes, while we compete for the democratic space, but we must continue to respect the rule of law and obey the rules and the law that guides the land. So we have seen these riots, confrontations, especially during the times of elections, but we call for peace and a peaceful and cordial way of convincing Ugandans to vote us based on the different manifestos as we build this multi-party democracy. The other challenge, part of which we are discussing here, is the functioning of the civil service, I would say the public service. You see, the architecture that we have is that we go out to the public to look for support as political parties. And we appreciate Ugandans because over the years, they have continued to show confidence in the NRM. When they vote us as NRM, we form government, and we raise resources, and then the civil service is there to implement the programs of government. You asked me the challenges and weaknesses that sometimes the civil service may not have the same appreciation of where we want to take Uganda as we have as political leaders. And these are the issues which we are discussing in Chankwanzi, that Ugandan is elected NRM basing on the social contract we have through the manifesto. How do we translate this manifesto into services for the people? Which service delivery is implemented by the civil service, and these are not political leaders, these are not elected leaders, but we have a duty to ensure that they understand the ideology of NRM as Honorable Mukura was explaining it, so they are able to provide better services as we provide this political guidance and leadership. So we need to reform the civil service and ensure that they align to the ideological clarity of the NRM government in order for service delivery.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chris. Allow me to switch to Honorable Dombo there. And Honorable Dombo, my question is really straightforward. Something that Professor Sarah said, sustainability from a generation to another generation. As the NRM, are you still in touch with this population? Do you know what their needs are?
Graphics. When the NRM government came to power, 1986, the population of Uganda was projected at 14 million Ugandans. The other day, UBOS released the preliminary results of the census that puts the population at 45.9 million Ugandans, approximately 46 million, meaning that over the period of 38 years, the population has increased more than 3 times. And this we attributed to, one, high fertility, but also the investments the NRM government has made in child survival programs means the children we are giving birth to do not die early. They survive into adulthood and get into old age, and which is a positive. But again, this population increase produces a dynamic where the majority of the Ugandans are children and young people. And this has an implication for our budgeting and planning, that the majority of Ugandans are young people. And therefore, in terms of political ideology, we have a responsibility to explain to them what happened in the past, but also assure them that the future is very bright. And that's why in our last manifesto, our theme for the manifesto was securing your future with a focus on the young people. So harnessing the demographic dividend is an opportunity, but also on the other hand can be a challenge if we don't handle the issue of the young people very well. But as NRM, we are alive to these realities, we are alive to these facts, and that's why when we gather here, the issue of programming for young people remains very central, because the majority of Ugandans are young, and they are children and young people, and we must center and refocus our budgeting, our planning, to ensure that we give them services. And this explains why we have invested in education, to ensure that our young people access affordable education, why we continue to invest in health, to ensure that they are healthy and they survive, why we invest in wealth creation. We would want our young people to be part of the economy, to be part of production. That explains why we have programs like Myoga, like a parish development model, where we have dedicated, for instance, the PDM, that 30% of the resources should go to the young people, because we know we have a huge population which we must invest in and move along with. So those are some of the issues I could raise for now, but we are here in Chankwanzi having our retreat, which is attended by cabinet ministers, permanent secretaries, and members of the Central Executive Committee and NRM Secretariat, discussing these issues, reflecting on the progress which we have registered as NRM, assessing where we are, but also looking at the challenges ahead and how we move forward as Uganda continues to move towards prosperity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let's sort out the technical glitch on that side so that we can be able to communicate better on that end. But let me come back to the studio. And Dr. Crispus, let me come to you. Every young person in this country, 75% now, as the preliminary results are saying, what is this NRM ideology? We have had the president say it, we have heard him sing it. What is this ideology?
Well, our ideology is what I may summarize as the mass line. Mass line meaning that whatever we do must address the base of our population. We should not do things just to address the interests of a few people. Whatever we do must reach everybody as much as possible. So we talk about education for all, we talk about health for all, we talk about wealth creation for all.
Security.
Pardon?
Security for all.
Security for all. That is really our line, that's our ideology.
Seems like a socialist ideology. Everything for everyone.
Absolutely. I think that's another way of summarizing it.
Professor, let me come to you. You talked about education, and the president hinted on education on Friday. UPE, UCE, and the number of students that are there. When do we evaluate the progress of this? I was listening to one scholar that said, in the last 2 years, the number of students we have lost from primary school, secondary school, and university cannot be accounted for. Is this the prosperity and the gains that we're talking about here?
Oh, wow. Yeah, thank you very much. I think it's still prosperity and progress. I think the problem that is being experienced is one of not tracking very well. That there's not much data tracking so that we say, if this cohort enters P1 at this stage, so that is 7 years plus 6 years, that would be 13, then plus 4 years of university or 5, that's 18. After 18 years, what do they look like? So there is that lack of tracking. There's a lack of assessing what the pathway to progress is like. But ideally, there's no mistake in mass educating people. There will be a challenge in that the jobs may not match the production. And now that is another issue of the state of the economy. But educating people, I mean, there's one American thinker who said, if you think educating people is a problem, try ignorance. So it's very important to educate people. And UPE could never have been wrong. USE could never have been wrong. Because while those of us here can afford to pay for ourselves, there are people out there who cannot afford to pay. So that basic education, however basic it is better than nothing. But doesn't mean that we shouldn't improve. And that's why you've seen over time, schools are being assessed, things like teacher presence in classrooms is being assessed or being reinforced, materials is being reinforced. But that's better than not having anything, because you think what is going to be given is not adequate enough.
Professor, it's not the argument of the education.
Yes.
We seem to focus on quantity rather than the quality of education. We seem to be creating a haves and have-nots.
No, I think, what do you mean by not having quality? I think we are at a demographic transition.
Can this education compete in the 21st century?
Yes, definitely it can. But there has to be stages. We were not going to jump from a stage where people don't have much to a stage where, I mean, like 20 steps ahead, where people then have everything. It's true with neoliberalism, there has been a difference created between urban and rural areas, between those who can survive in a market economy and those that needed the hand-holding in the ideology that took people to the bush. So that will be there. And you know, we took that turn, not by choice of government, but by a global economic dispensation. So we are still recovering from that. But what has government done to bridge the inequality gap? That while the urban areas and the fairly well-to-do areas are being served by primary schools or schools that are privately driven by private entrepreneurs, the government is augmenting the gap in the rural areas. And that's why you will see whatever the kind of classroom, at least there are materials that have reached, there is a teacher, there is PLOA being done, and all that kind. It is going to take a journey because our population is rising at a galloping speed, okay? And it is 67% younger people. Those younger people first have to be educated, and then they have to be planned for. And that's why you now see slogans like Operation Wealth Creation, like Parish Development Model, like job creation, like agro-industrialization, because everyone is aware that these products have to be absorbed somewhere. But what is the kind of education that is required? You can't say that because Uganda doesn't have industries, therefore we don't need to train scientists, but that will be a lame way of analyzing things. I think what we need is the planning authorities, the education planning authorities, the national planning authorities, to look and see where is this country going? What will it be like in the next 20 years, in the next 50 years, in the next 100 years? And then work the education towards that direction. But you see, it cannot be out of touch with reality. So it's moving together, and it is on course, but of course there's a lot of room for improvement.
Thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu, let me come to you. When you talk about Lee Kuan Yew, when you talk about Julius Nyerere, when you talk about Kwame Nkrumah, does the president of this country feature in the same breath with these people, if we're discussing legacy?
No, we're talking about two different things. The president of this country has done a lot of, you'll go in history, and he has got a legacy. And that legacy is what he has done. And what I find very, very common nowadays is criticism of what has gone wrong, not what has gone right. You find people talking about something that went, in fact, a few minutes ago, you talked about quantity as opposed to quality. Now, that's a criticism that makes me laugh. Before UPE, nearly 60 to 70% of our children would go without going to school at all. After UPE, a lot of these kids poured into school. In fact, when we started UPE, I was in the Ministry of Education. We wanted a classroom of 40 people. We had 150 to 200 children in primary school, in the primary one. Now, that was one of our biggest problems. What do we do with this number? Now, that was the beginning. And then they started working on it by putting up classrooms, by making sure we had more teachers. And now, at least we're down to a figure of about 60 instead of 40. The whole idea is that you start something and it keeps on moving. And today, what you call quantity is not really that correct. I do agree that the quality might not be as good as it's supposed to be, but that is not because of the children. That's because of our ability to be able to provide enough teachers to teach these children. And that's a different argument altogether. Now, the challenges are there in the UPE. The challenges are there in the USE, in the educational system. They're there. You're going to find them. We have to keep on fighting to make sure that we achieve the absolute right thing to do. For example, I want 40 children in class. We don't have them yet. What do we need? More classrooms. What do we need? More teachers. But our population is also increasing. Remember when UPE started, the population was smaller. Today the population is bigger. We're talking about 45.9. At the time when UPE came, we were talking about 25 million. So as UPE increases, you have challenges also. As the population increases, the UPE has got challenges now. So the whole point is very simple. Government has to sort of work a little bit harder. That's where pragmatism comes in. Do we have people who are pragmatic enough to be able to take the bull by the horn and be able to implement the so-called problems that we have, the challenges. One of the reasons why some of you go to university is to find solutions to these challenges. That's where I brought in the elite. Our elite have the same ability to overcome these challenges, our educated group. Now, I keep on pointing to the elite because they are the ones we educate and be able to take over these challenges that we have in this country. The reason why I keep on bringing Lee Kuan Yew, and I'm sorry I do bring him very often in my speech, is that he realized this problem. President Nyerere realized these problems, and he started right from the beginning to try and unite the country, at the same time got the elite to understand the craft of running a state. One of our biggest problems is we have people who do not appreciate how to run a state and the challenges that you must have in running a state.
The assumption is that they know how to, they have an idea of what you're talking
about.
No.
What I find is, in fact, in the olden days and now, what I find in our syllabus is that we create a lot of technocrats and not leaders. Technocrats who know everything. They can write a book, they can write a plan, they can do everything you can, but they cannot lead. And this is where our problem is. That is the statecraft I'm talking about. And that's why the president took the ministers, plus the civil service, and everybody. And somebody was talking about the civil service, that they don't know. In fact, I think the biggest problem we have is not the civil service. The civil service know how to manage their part of the site. The problem is actually with our leaders. How to bridge the gap between what we are supposed to do and the civil service, what they are supposed to implement. This is where the problem is. And in fact, I heard the president saying, oh, the accounting officers and this. But the accounting officers are sometimes bullied by the leaders. They are bullied. And sometimes they are made to do things which they're not supposed to do. For example, some of the problems you find that the leaders bully them to an extent that sometimes they do the wrong things because they are being bullied by these leaders. Now, until you can find a way to create a relationship between the managers and the leaders of our government, you are going to have this problem. And I'm happy that the president took all of them there so that they can have a bridge between them. And I don't want to talk on the niceties, the nice things we do. No, let's talk about the nasty things that are done.
But Captain Francis Babu, before I get to Honorable Mike Mukula, that bridge you're talking about, can it be created in 7 days?
Oh, yes.
7 days?
Oh, yes, because they already know it is there. It is now to try and put it together and go and practice it. For example, the biggest problem we have today in our country is implementation. By the way, if you go in our library of this government, Minister of Finance, Minister of Agriculture, and get the programs which are there for development, you'll be surprised. They are fantastic. One of the biggest problems, and in fact when we were talking earlier on, I wanted to say it, we do not communicate. Government, and I'm happy the president of Kenya the other day in his speech, when he was talking, he said one of the problems is they don't communicate.
Actually, he said you are talking at them instead of talking to them.
That's right. So this is what is happening here. We are talking at them. We are not communicating to them. And I think the biggest problem is how do we communicate. In fact, I sometimes wonder, public relations officers, I hear every ministry has got one. I don't hear them communicating.
Okay.
Just the other day, when they were doing the census, the communication was extremely poor. They should have communicated. And that communication would make a very big difference, even now, if they can communicate to the people. You're talking about the young people? The young people today are so, they've got the affinity to absorb. So if the communication can go to them and they understand, they would absorb it. The problems, we are not communicating to them.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Finally, before we take a break, Honorable Mike Mukula, 38 years, after 38 years, what next?
I think the narrative has changed now. The discussion is now looking at the future. And that's what Honorable Babu and Dr. Kionga and my sister have been discussing. Look at it this way. The 80s and the 90s had its own challenges. You had insecurity, you had economic reforms, you had strategic mapping, looking at the future, where do we want to go, aligning and synchronizing what you call a strategic direction. And now, when we look at the current conundrum, the current challenges we face, the young people have a different narrative. They look at things differently. They don't look at the 80s. That's a different thing. We now face new challenges as a country, and that's what the young people want to discuss. One, for example, is poverty, dealing with poverty. How do we address the issues of poverty, both urban and rural poverty? Two, youth unemployment. How do we deal with youth unemployment, both the issues that surround the young people's ideals and their interests? Three, corruption. How do we deal with corruption? This is the narrative. This is what the young people are talking about. And that is what Chankwanzi is discussing now. And the president is saying, I see where the challenges are, the accounting officers, the procurement areas. This is where the problem is. You have the fourth challenge, and that is service delivery. That's what the team in Chankwanzi is dealing with now. How do we deal with service delivery? How do we connect? How do we improve and see that the person in Chankwanzi, where they are now, the health center 2s, health center 3s, and 4, how do they get the medicine that they require? We have universal, the mass line, the universal health service that should be provided. These are the challenges that you see. They look at the issues of how do the young people, the one the president is talking about, the jobs. Do you have to pay for a bribe to get a job? And that's why you look at tribalism, maybe. You can look at certain areas where people have to use who do you know and how do we get to that job. And that's where corruption comes in. Now, all this put together, this is where the discussion is on. And that's why the young people are saying, how do we address this? Now, the foundation of all this, and that's why the mass line Dr. Kiongo was talking about, is how do we address these issues, first of all, at the grassroots level. That's why the parish development model comes in. And that's why you're saying, how do we put those people into the money economy? That's the discussion. You now come into the second issue. How do we deal with the markets? People are now producing. How do we have the value chain? You're producing oranges, you're producing milk. Uganda produces over 4.4 billion liters, the last time I checked, of milk. We consume possibly about 800 million or 880 million liters in terms of the value chain into the market. How do we reach out to the market in the region? How do we deal with these issues? That is what Chankwanzi is talking about.
Okay.
Now, when you come into the direction we need to look at the age bracket.
Honorable, I'm going to ask that we take a quick break. I come back to you there. But let me read this one message that comes in burning. This is Tumsime. He says, over the past 4 decades, the NRM obviously is detached with the average citizen. Corruption seems to be the only way out. Though it's mushrooming and anti-corruption units are being made, there's not much that has been achieved, like the IGG, the Attorney General, and we have all these bodies fighting the same thing. See you tonight. Thank you very much. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, Honorable Mukula will complete his point, and then we'll switch to the team that is in Chankwanzi to respond to some of the queries there. This and more after this break.
The national resistance movement emerged on Uganda's political scene after Obote's UPC second regime massively rigged the 1980s elections, which the Democratic Party was irrefutably projected to win. Yoweri Museveni declared war in protest in 1981 in the jungles of Luwero Triangle for 5 years, which later led to the defeat of Milton Obote and the military commission government led by General Tito Okello Lutwa in January 1986.
Said, we know Obote is going to cheat. You DP, even if you win, you will not be in power. We are going to have a new method. We are going to the bush. So we had to put up that promise. And that turned out that there are two, that pronounced that there were only two serious politicians in Uganda. One Obote who said, even if I get the vote of my wife, I will rule. and he ruled. And the other one who said, if you cheat, I'll go to the bush. And he went to the bush.
During the swearing-in ceremony,
Commercial break here on Behind the Headlines. My name is Timothy Nyangweso. In the studio, I have Professor Sarah Sali. I'm joined by Dr. Honorable Crispus Chionga, Honorable Captain Francis Babu, Honorable Captain Mike Mukula, and in Chankwanzi, I have Dr. Chris Baryomunsi, the Minister for Minister for ICT and National Guidance. I have Honorable Lumala Dombo, the Director of Communications at the NRM. I also have the Deputy Secretary General Rosemary Namayanja there. I also have Honorable Lydia Wanyoto in Chankwanzi, the National Chairperson of the Women's League there. So we're going to finish the conversation here and we'll switch to Chankwanzi to have some of them respond to some of the queries that are here. Honorable Mike Mukula, you were concluding a point, especially on what the future looks like after 38 years.
I think the future looks very bright. Of course, we have challenges. There is no country, even the United States has its challenges. China, by the time they had the reforms in 1987, China had the same challenges we face now, even including India. So people should not think that Uganda, when you talk about corruption, when you talk about youth unemployment, when you talk about poverty, this is only limited to Uganda. These countries that we've gone through, countries that, if you looked at Google, if you Google China's history and its dynamic, Dr. Kyung has been there, it will tell you that, yes, we've dealt with much more difficult challenges in the past, insecurity, where you had to lose blood. But right now, issues like corruption are the ones that we must deal with head on. And I want to assure you, and I assure the listeners, that the commitment to fight, for example, corruption is anchored on 3 key points. One is the legal framework. You must have a legal framework which is effective. 2, an institutional framework. That must be in place. And 4 and 3, the political will. The retreat in Chankwanzi is to now go back and say, how do we dovetail the implementation, the fight against corruption, and ensure that we answer to the questions that are being raised by the population. This is where the question is. And what strategies do we place to ensure that we can be able to deal with corruption or those who are corrupt head on? How do we deal with the issues of youth unemployment? I employ over 3,000 people now as an individual. I'm providing opportunities in the private sector, not in the public sector. But there is a complementarity between the private sector and the public sector, because what you need to do is to have an ideal environment. You need to have the correct financial institutions. Now, for example, I can tell you that you can now go, for us who are in the private sector, to Uganda Development Bank with an interest rate of 10 to 12% Uganda shillings and an average of about 6 to 8% in the dollar. You can now be able to transform and build an effective, vibrant industrial base in this country. And more so, to give you the long-range vision, we now have discovered oil. Let me tell you, the discovery of oil and gas in this country gives the young people the opportunity to see that we have a bright future. The movement of oil from the Albertine region all the way to Tanga, 1,440 kilometers approximately, means that there will be wealth. But how do we align this wealth so that the mass line, the correct line that we're talking about, can be consolidated by building infrastructure, ensuring that you have enough power continuously all the time. We now have a surplus, but we need to continue to ensure that we power the country. You need to ensure that the water, clean water for production and consumption is available. You need to ensure that you fine-tune education in the areas of tertiary institutions, for example, to ensure that the young people that the curricula develops are employable. That's the direction the young people want to see. And I want to say, really, when you put all this together, the meeting of minds between the civil servants, the political leaders of this country, and the ones that midwife the social contract, that is what you call the manifesto, can now be able to see where the weaknesses are, basically carrying out a SWOT analysis.
Okay.
How do we deal with this and ensure that we come out of Chankwazi much better, fine-tuned, and ensure that we can be able to put traction to the future and strategic direction of this country, and answer to the young people in terms of the questions of implementation, and ensure that this revolution continues to remain dynamic and answers the questions of the young people.
Thank you very much. Let me turn to the team that is in Chankwanzi, and I'll start with Honorable Lumala Dombo that is there, the Director of Communication. Honorable Dombo, when I come to you, the question that is really lingering in my mind is the trust of the young people, of the population, to the NRM. I've seen reports from Afrobarometer really dwindling year in, year out. Why is the NRM losing the trust of the public or the population? Apologies, Honorable Dombo. I don't think we can get you clearly. I also don't see you getting me clearly either. So let me ask the team to sort out that glitch. When it's done, they'll be able to get to me. And I come to the team of Chankwanzi there. Apologies for that one. Professor, I know we have beaten this animal called corruption here over and over. But the president named 4 categories of people: permanent secretaries, cows, town clerks, and he mentioned Gombola chiefs. He talked about people bribing for employment, loss of money through procurement. He also said money is getting lost with these people who are handling money. These people have been named. Then what?
Yes, thank you very much. Of course, I don't doubt the president's knowledge of who actually is corrupt, because I think his office is the biggest consumer of intelligence, and we have enough intelligence being gathered. But even when that is known, there is a process you follow to deal, because again, this is part of the democratization we have that was brought into the country because of the NRM. So there's a process that has to be followed, things like fair hearing, natural justice. That's why you have the IGG investigates, and then everybody also investigates. Then the courts have to do their work. So he has mentioned them. I think what his mentioning has done is to send a signal to the responsible entity to carry on the next step and do the right thing. And I imagine the responsible entities know themselves, and they should do the right thing. Maybe they have to investigate, maybe they have to prosecute, and give the president a report. So by mentioning them is a sign that actually work is starting. So we may not just sit here and speculate because we do not have the information. And of course, there is corruption, and the officers he mentioned are the officers that are office bearer. They're like accounting officers.
Yes.
But and that is bad and should be addressed, and I believe is being addressed. I, for one, cannot be here and speculate because I don't have as much information as he has. But the mere fact that he has mentioned it, corruption is a bad thing, okay? It's a bad thing in that it compromises the future of the future generation. It compromises the future of the country. But again, another thing we should not be blind to is its institutionalized nature. And by looking at corruption as institutionalized, we have also to pay attention about those who are willingly ready to give and those who are willingly ready to take. If you look at just a simple case of a traffic policeman, a traffic policeman will arrest you for speaking on your phone while driving because there's a rule against speaking on your phone while driving. And it has health justifications, it has safety justifications, it has legal justifications. But you'll find that people are more interested, or we are more interested as road users, to settle it there than having it carry it through the whole way. Now, settling it there is actually corruption because you're compromising standards, okay? We may want a slot in a place, aid of employee, or you may want a slot for a child in a school, and you're told this is where the bus stops, and you want to influence. So what am I trying to say is that beyond those that are mentioned is a whole culture of corruption in the country that has cropped up and that has to be arrested. So it is good if the responsible entities take what the president has mentioned and begin there as a way of planting a seed in zero tolerance towards corruption. But while that is also occurring on the top, there's also need for action to occur at other levels. And here I take the example of Rudy Giuliani, who was one time a mayor of New York. It's true at the time he rose, New York had all the kinds of mafia kind of people there who were committing big crimes. And he just didn't start there. He also started with everybody who was spraying graffiti, everybody who was doing. So he took out the small crimes in as much as was paying attention to the big crimes. And that way, New York got pacified, it got gentrified, it became a city where rich people would desire to go.
And that's exactly where I want to ask you another question, Professor. On that fighting of crime, we have now a tax unit of State House being created. The president has also spoken about an accounting and audit unit to be created. It seems like duplication to solve the same problem. How do we end this?
Yeah, and it's good you say it seems like duplication. And again, this means we don't have all the facts. But probably the fountain of honor who created the second unit has the facts of why he is actually creating another unit. To us, it looks like duplication. But in reality, for all the 38 years of the NRM, we have been creating these things. When NRM was, URA was being created, we thought that would stamp out corruption. When IGG was being created, we thought that would stamp out corruption. But the problem with institutionalized nature is that it looks like when a solution is created, the problem metamorphoses. And now that's why another tax body is being created. And ideally, it's being created to check corruption in the URA. Not so. Yes, so you have that. But you see the challenge with that, of course, as you're saying, it looks like duplication. That's why we should have an honest conversation. Why are parallel bodies being created instead of the previous bodies that were created being evaluated to see if they are fit for purpose? Probably we should say they're not fit for purpose, we disband before creating another one. But again, as I say, we don't have as much information as the one who is creating them to be able to judge whether that's the right thing. But from where we stand, it looks like it's a duplication of roles, and it looks like it's an avoidance of holding the other group accountable. But it could also be that the mandate of URA, of course, which was not to check corruption, it was to emphasize tax compliance. Probably its mandate has grown so much that probably they need support. But as we say, the issue is with institutionalized corruption in a society, the mechanisms to stamp it out have to be multi-pronged because it looks like it's the cancer. It looks like it's an amoeba. When you check it here, it metamorphoses and reappears in another place.
Thank you very much. Let me give an attempt to going back to Chankwanzi, to my panel that is there. Honorable Dombo, the question I had put to you is the growing mistrust between government and its population. I was referring to a report by Afrobarometer over the past years that shows the dwindling of trust between the population and the NRM. Why is this happening, and what can be done about it?
First and foremost, the report by Afrobarometer showed that there is increasing trust. On the contrary, when you visit most of the areas, and one of the things which came out very clear in that report, many people have been preparing lies that violence in the elections is perpetuated by government and by state agencies. But in that report, when you read it, you said that political parties in the opposition have also been accused in that report, and it is something that came out clearly in conformity with what the president has been telling people. Actually, in one of the sessions during the dissemination of the results, somebody asked a question, and he said, if we put an opposition person with a yellow T-shirt, and we got an NRM and gave him a red T-shirt, and we put them on the streets, which one was likely to be attacked violently by thugs in town? And everybody concurred that it was the NRM, and the question would be, who would those people be? But getting on why the report showed that some of our people may lose trust in government and what government does is basically the reasons which have been given by the first discussants. For instance, the perception about corruption. When government does not come up strongly to address the issue of corruption, then it can take away the people from us. If the security agencies become violent and they don't respect human rights, it can affect the public perception about how people take and respond on issues of government. If the young people don't have enough jobs, because if you look at previously, the biggest employer in Uganda was government, because government employs about 500,000 people. And that is the maximum that we can. But right now, when you look at the population of young people coming out of universities, and you look where would they go to work. So government must come up with alternative measures and creation of an environment to create jobs for the young people. Jobs in the government are about 500,000. But we have industries. So government must create an environment that must encourage the development of industries so that young people can go to the industries. Those that can go and work in commercial agriculture or participate themselves as entrepreneurs, they can be encouraged to get into those sectors. When you have seen here, wherever you are, the network here has been interrupted because partially the network perhaps is not as strong as it should have been. Yet, through ICT, government can create an environment where many jobs can be created. We're here with the Minister of ICT, and he's working a lot to ensure that ICT covers the whole country. And we believe very soon that the network throughout the whole country will be excellently well. And this can also create a perception of young people. If they don't get jobs, this can be a problem. But the other, which people must address, the recent census results that were published. You can see that the biggest population of young people are still dependents. They depend on the parents, they depend on the people who are working. If the majority of the people are still dependents, that means the government must come up with areas which should increase revenue collection. This is one of the things that has been addressed here in the leaders' retreat, to find out that the increasing need for money to fund government activities. What are the alternative sources of income for government and what must we do? That's why the president was talking about increasing of value addition to ensure that we can get people into employment, but also getting enterprises that can be taxed in order to pay tax, to increase productivity, to increase on the electricity so that we can provide jobs. So government continues to do what it's supposed to do to ensure that the young people can get jobs. An environment should be created to attract more investors that can create jobs for the young people, but also to invest in the other activities that enhance the quality of life. But there are also bigger challenges which, for instance, during the retreat, one of the things that was talked about was the corruption in the district service commissions. There are many young people who have read. Through decentralization, government thought that we shall enable people to join service through a decentralized format. But recently, people came and complained to the president that in some areas in Bunyoro, people have to pay 10 million shillings in order to get a job. And this is not only isolated to Bunyoro. In many places in Uganda, many district service commissions have been very corrupt. And if young people have read and they go to government to get a job in a district and they pay 10 million, that young person will go back angry. He'll get angry to government, yet it is not government that has instituted the corruption. That's why we must fight corruption, so that the young people have gotten education under NRM. They also get jobs under decentralization without paying money. Then the public perception on what government is doing is enhanced. When we also look at the impunity with which members of some of the members of the security agencies, the way they have responded at times when they go to arrest people in the public, at times the members of the security agencies when they have supported land grabbing in the respective areas, the RDC is not doing enough or participating together with land grabbers. This can affect, and that's why President Museveni has been very forceful on the RDCs to ensure that people who are staying on land are protected from the land grabbers, so that the work of government of providing security for everybody and property is maintained. So these are some of the challenges that we have been encountering, but as a country or as a party, we must get back the population to explain. We have another challenge, which has been the increasing need for public finance of projects and the needs of the people. Look at the drugs in the health centers. Right now, government increased the salary of medical workers. But have medical workers responded by being present in the medical facilities whenever the people go there and they want service? This is something that we must help to answer. And it is not only government that must answer, but even the local governments, the district councillors, the chief administrative officers. Why should a woman go to a hospital or a health center to deliver and she doesn't get a medical worker? Yeah. And yet every month that medical worker is paid a salary. These are issues that we must work as party to ensure that if you are a medical worker and you are a work of government and you are being paid a salary, when you go to work, you must be in the facilities working. In the retreat, somebody gave an example, one of the ministers. And he said he went to a certain area where the medical workers had put a signpost to say that this health facility only works from Monday to Friday.
Sunday to Friday. Sunday to Friday.
And when they were asked whether people don't fall sick on Saturday and Sunday, and the minister had to give directives. So one of the resolutions about this is that all the leaders must get back home to ensure that we do supervision. We provide supervision to ensure service delivery to the population is enhanced, so
thank you, Honorable Dombo.
But also the service to the population gets better.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dombo. Please allow me bring in Honorable Rose Namayanja there, who is close to you there. Honorable, one of the things that has been the gains of the NRM is having electoral cycles year in, year out, every 5 years, and we've had 6 of them. The biggest challenge with that, like Honorable Dombo has said, is the violence that comes with the elections. What can be made possible, what reforms can be put in place to ensure that our democracy is not for sale?
I thank you so much. I didn't get the question very well.
Honorable Rose Namayanja is asking about elections that Honorable Dombo has hinted on, about the success of having elections every 5 years. The question I am asking you is, what reforms need to be put in place to have a peaceful, credible election without violence, and that our democracy is not for sale?
First of all, I want to thank you so much for this time, and our viewers for watching. And even before I go to that, I just want to say that when you talk about legacy and accountability, you talk about where we were when the NRM was coming to power, the journey thus far, as has been expounded by all the comrades, and then where we are now. What are we looking at, first and foremost? And I want to say that NRM has been able to do all that we have done because it was founded on solid ground. That unlike, and this brings me actually to the question you are asking, that unlike other political parties, even before they went to the bush and when they were in the bush, they knew what the trajectory they were looking at for the country. Other political parties will say our challenge, our program, our intention is to get this government out of power. But here it was not just getting the government out of power. The ideological foundations were very strong. The 4 core principles upon which we got the 10-point programs, which have been the bedrock and the foundation for the achievements that we have made. And some of the challenges we have today are as a result of the successes that have been registered. Because when you talk about, well, one of the issues that we are grappling with as a country is unemployment. But how has this come about? This has come about as a result of liberalizing the education sector, ensuring that, that all of us, that all the children go to school, from 1 university to over 50 universities, from graduating 3,000 students to over 400,000 per year. So those are some of the challenges that have come as a result of the successes of the national resistance movement. And as time goes on, we like I said, we look at where we have been, where we are now. The challenges that we face today are different from the challenges then. And one of the things, you talked about the issue of trust. Why? Because it starts even before we talk about violence or no violence. It starts with continuing to build that trust among the population. And this time round, the demographics that we are dealing with, the young people that do not know much about what transpired before, but that we now have to address the challenges of employment. And that's why you see the changes even within the education sector. We started from just ensuring that everybody goes to school. We're now talking about skilling. When you talk about the skilling program, it's ensuring that we have young people as job creators, not as job seekers. They get employed. Once they are employed, their concern will be their jobs and not anything else, and their trust will have improved. So as a party, one of the things that we espouse is rule of law, is democracy, is ensuring that we pursue those ideals that we cherish. So the safeguards are there. Like Honorable Dombo said, the overarching policy of government, of the NRM, is that the army and all the security forces, they are pro-people forces. And all that they do is to ensure that they protect the people and their property. Yes, there could be some individual cases, but even then, there are mechanisms through which they can be handled. But overall, I think for me, what is important is for all politicians across the divide to have politics with maximum and mutual respect by each other, that even when, like Honorable Dombo said, when they were attacking people who were putting on yellow, this was not on the side of government, it was the other side. So as government handles the military, the police that can use excessive force, we just call upon our colleagues on the other side of the aisle to ensure that we compete. We compete respectively, and we do politics out of mutual respect, and ensure that whatever we do is for the good of this country. But as a party, as government, we want to maintain, and we continue maintaining, that we want a very peaceful, every time, we want peaceful elections, we want peaceful competition, we want politics on issues, based on issues other than anything else. Otherwise, that is what took the NRM to the bush, to ensure that we have stability, which we are so proud of, that today we can be anywhere, you can move anywhere and do whatever you want, for as long as you are doing what you are doing within the ambits of the law. So I want to say that as a government, as a party, we are still committed to that, and all the efforts that have been undertaken, right from 1996, when we had the first elections, there have been progressive changes. The NRM government was the first to ensure that we have free and fair elections.
Thank you very much, Honorable Rosemary. Please allow me switch to Honorable Lydia Wanyoto, who is there. Honorable Wanyoto, one of the things we know about the NRM is every once in a while they will go to Nali, they'll go to Chankwanzi, discussions are had, narratives are put together. You are now in Chankwanzi, permanent secretaries, cows, cabinet ministers, you're all there. And the country is eagerly awaiting what is coming from there. What should they expect, and what should their anticipation be from there?
Thank you, Timothy, and to our listeners. We have a social contract with the Ugandans, which started in 2021, 2026. So we are already in 2024. Every year we make an effort to track the commitments we made, which are in form of the NRM Manifesto 2021-2026. But also it's aligned to the National Development Plan, and as you know, also through the every annual budget. Now, right now, as you know, we've just worked on the national budget for the financial 2024-2025, and would like to make sure that we are on track and on record to ensure that we fulfill and implement the social contract we have with the Ugandans. And if there are any challenges there, we should be able to address them and be able to deliver the accountability. The legacy that you are talking about and accountability is the reason we are here, and is the reason why the NRM government has been able to account to the people and to explain areas where we have not been able to achieve, and those that which we have been able to achieve or to deliver, we explain. But interestingly, I've been hearing a lot of debate about young people and looking like it is a burden or a challenge. I would like to inform Ugandans that part of the biggest achievements of our government is to ensure that we have a young population that is growing and be able to utilize the potential and leverage the energies to take our country forward. And you cannot run away from very, very important pillars of our contribution to the country. Even like UPE, every Ugandan is now able to read and write. So while you talk about the quality, the mass line that they are talking about is we deal with the quantity first. The campaign to deal with the quality is when you open up the window to the private sector, or going forward to ensure that every Ugandan is immunized, if talking about health, but also every Ugandan has a chance to face a blackboard. And we are dealing with eradicating literacy in our country. So the reason why we often, like you've asked me, we often come to retreats is to make sure that we are on track and to make sure that all of us become a team. If you hear that we have cabinet, we have all permanent secretaries, and then you have the political party leadership that goes to seek the social contract with the people, we must have the same meeting of minds, and we should be on the same level of understanding and appreciating, and then we account to each other and be able to put questions and get answers so that we are able, going forward, to be able to account to Uganda, but also to be able to make sure that we correct the mistakes along the way, but also we celebrate the legacies that you're talking about. But most important, that's why we are here past 11 p.m. addressing Ugandans to ensure that we are explaining what we promised. And we are able to also look at how far have we gone with the tracking the manifesto implementation. And if we have gaps, we should be able to account why those gaps exist, and going forward, what solutions we have. As you may want to know, Timothy, the National Development Plan that speaks to Vision 2040 is every 5 years. That resonates with the political calendar of our country. Now, as we speak, the third National Development Plan is coming to an end, but we'll be able to explain to the Ugandans what we are taking forward that we have not been able to conclude in the third development plan, but bring it on to the fourth development plan, aligned to the manifesto, but most important, aligned also to the resources that we have.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Lydia there. Please allow me to get back to the studio, and I'll be back for you to give closing remarks there. Honorable Crispus Jonga, going back to history, because some of the young people that we are talking to really don't know this history. UPM, you had won a member of parliament seat there. Why did you choose to go to the bush instead of consolidating and building this party in that time?
Well, Timothy, as I said before, I think I gave two explanations. One, my reading was that election we had gone through had not been conducted properly. Our colleagues in the UPC just rigged themselves into power. And behind them, they had what I may call a party security mechanism. So whatever they wanted would be imposed on the people. So my reading was that to go in that type of setup, we are not going to make a difference. And our conclusion was that the only option left now was to build a mass line, as we have been saying, go to the population, organize the population, and the population liberate themselves.
Thank you very much. Captain Francis Babu,
Yes.
elections in this country have become really one of the things that we say democracy. But they become very expensive. And they become not service, but a job. Today I was listening and saying we need a law to restrict funding of the elections. The commercialization of these elections. People saying, nangende kangende ndieko. How do we change the character of our elections? Will reforms make elections more democratic? What do we need to do to have peaceful and credible elections?
Thank you very much. First of all, before I go to those elections, earlier on you were talking about the intelligence that the president is setting up. In the United States, they have 18 intelligence organizations. I'm sure you only know about 2, FBI and CIA. They have 18, they're all under an organization called the United States Intelligence Community. And this was set up by the order of the president. Then it's not a law. It was set up by the presidential order.
As Commander-in-Chief.
Yeah, and they all fall under this, including the ones in the Navy, in the military intelligence. They all report to this organization. They collect this information. That's how efficient they are. Therefore, His Excellency the President is free to come out with a presidential directive, in our case, or an order to set up an organization. Where I don't agree, they should not be in State House. They should be independent. He should form them and give them the independence they deserve to report to him. Now, that's one point. The reason why I'm saying so, I am sorry, I'm going to be a little bit unfair to the president. Everybody he has sent out of State House does not perform. They think they're superior. He therefore has to get people who have got the credibility to be able to be the head of. In fact, the one he has chosen to do the URA intelligence has already got a smear. Whether it is propaganda or whether it is not, they have produced a letter, they have produced a case judgment which says the man was convicted. And therefore now he's heading this organization. Now, if that is true, then His Excellency the President has a problem. Maybe the people in State House can be, they're nice people. Maybe they can be taken somewhere else instead of these responsible jobs where they end up having a lot of problems. I just wanted to bring that one up, the 2 intelligence organizations, that he is free to come up with a directive. Intelligence, it moves. You can form a group to do a task, a particular task, and that is he is the chairman of the National Security Committee. Now, this again comes out because people don't understand intelligence gathering. It is very complicated, and therefore, depending on the situation, you can form a task force to carry out an intelligence on a particular thing. And I don't know why they even announce this. They shouldn't sometimes. I think they should leave them alone. But there they do, and they have told us they are coming. I like to be very honest. I've heard a lot of things that you people have said, but you are not listening to what the people are saying. I can tell you right now, the young people on television, when they hear this kind of information given, they switch it off. There are people who are disgusted by the way some of our political class is behaving. Bad behavior, bad utterances. They misbehave. And some of these things actually filter through because people brag about it. And when they do, the average person is not happy with what is going on. And they will tell you, we are not interested. In other words, we need now to sit down. Wait a minute, what is the challenge here? How do we get to them? The earlier on you said we talk to them, but we do not reach them. How do we reach them? And a lot of people have been saying some good things. They talk about social contracts. They're not interested. They're interested in seeing action. What are you doing about these corrupt people? What are you doing about these people? And why do you only mention civil service? Why don't you mention the political class? The other day, the Mabati were not in civil service. I just want to bring this point up. Some of the political gurus here, they intimidate the civil service. And I'm sorry, I'm not going to keep quiet about it. I don't want to mention names because it's not my work. They have enough intelligence organization, as my sister said, to collect that information. And people in this organization called NRM, they hate each other. They talk badly about each other. They spoil the party. Now, this also creates a problem. There's a bigger problem within the party itself. You've got to go back and clean yourself up. We need to sanitize the organization. By the way, there was one point you didn't realize. The Honorable Dr. Kionga here was the Secretary General of our party. He can tell you what he saw. And I wish you had asked him that. He would have told you that this is, during his period, the problems he faced. Obviously, in any organization, there are challenges. They need to be resolved. I agree entirely, I have no problem with that. But when it continues and it becomes personal, and we lose some of our good leaders, we've got very good leaders, but some of them have given up because they've been pushed by some people within this organization. So we need to sit down, and as you said earlier on, what are the challenges? How do we get? And they should get away from all these theories, like social contracts. Yeah, we know who wrote about social contracts. We are now talking about a situation we have. we have a situation out there. These people do not, in fact, let me tell you, there are people who just hate to hear what you're saying. They want action. And the only thing that convinces Ugandans now is that you act. Don't talk about it. The things you talk about are very good, very well written, in very good English, but they don't reach the man at the bottom of the ladder. So your question simply says, these challenges, we must get to them. And to get to them, we need people who are pragmatic.
Okay.
And that's the answer. And by the way, not only pragmatic, they have to be honest. Some of our leaders are dishonest. I am sorry to say it. And they are dishonest against each other. They are dishonest to this country, and they must change. And that is a mindset change. I'm not against any particular person. I'm just trying to, the things you do are not good, because you spoil it for the good people we have in this country. We have 49, you're talking about, let's assume 50 million cannot vote, but very soon they will be voting. These are people who are not going to listen to your money. You're asking, why do we have this violence and all that? We have a problem. Since we started multi-parties, and I'm sorry to say this, we don't understand them. We think going into election is a war. We think the competition and our traits come out. Our traits of intimidating, and by the way, it's not only the NRM, all the political parties.
Thank you, Captain Babu. Time is fast spent, but let me come to Honorable Mike Mukula. Honorable, my question to you is really, we have celebrated 38 years. The gains are there, the challenges are there, we appreciate them. What's the future of NRM as a party? And is there a plan for transition past the president?
Let me first, as I come to answer your question, tell you the broader picture of the African continent. Because we don't live in isolation. We're not an island as a state. We are describing this context, you must look at the broad aspect of the African continent. And that's when you look at Pan-Africanism. When you look at the years past, post-colonial times, we had military coups, we had revolutionary or insurgencies and so on and so forth. I think Africa has transcended that now. We have come to a stage where there is now the democratic evolution. This democracy comes in with accountability, the demand for constitutionalism, the rule of law and order, transparency, and so on and so forth. And then you have come in with a new generation. You have seen Kenya now with the Gen-Zs. You've got generation A, the Alpha. If you look at Uganda, the age between 0 to 8 is almost 20% of this population, 8 million. What am I telling you? When you look at the African continent now, I look at, first of all, a better African continent. Congo, which is 11 times the size of Uganda, and 91 times the size of Rwanda, is now an emerging economy. You look at Ethiopia, among the fastest growing economies in the world. You look at Kenya, despite its challenges. Uganda is among the seven fastest growing economy in the world. Africa has got a positive future. And I want to give the young people and those who are listening to us to understand that now that Congo, which has got This has got 14 of the most valuable minerals in the world in the DRC Congo. It's estimated that DRC Congo has got an estimated wealth of close to 42 trillion US dollars, much bigger than the United States and Europe put together, underground and tapped. Where is Africa? Uganda has discovered oil and gas. South Sudan has discovered oil and gas. Kenya has got a little bit of oil. The same with Somalia. So when you look at Tanzania and Mozambique, they have discovered the largest gas deposits in the Indian Ocean. This tells you that the African continent has a bright future. What we now need to do, when I narrow it down to Uganda, is to look at the challenges we face and how to address them. That's what the Chankwanzi retreat is about. How do we reform? How do we address the needs of our young people? Social inequality. When you look at economic justice, when you look at reforms, a paradigm shift in the energy and the creation of young people who can now be able to get jobs who are employable not only in the country but outside. How do we industrialize? How do we maintain peace and stability in the African continent? How do we navigate Africa, as it were, in terms of the economic and social economic transformation that we all envisage? What am I saying? The future of the African continent is bright. We only need to ensure, as Captain Babu has said, we need to get quality in terms of leadership. And as we move forward, the national resistance movement will always look at placement of leaders depending on the needs and the challenges faces.
Okay.
Definitely there will come a time when we'll manage transition, but we haven't arrived there yet. We are looking at how we can be able to address the issues that face our nation currently now, and we have come a long way. We have a bright future going forward. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Captain Mike Mukula. Let me come to the team in Chankwanzi, my panel that is there. Because of time, I'll give each of you 2 minutes to give your parting shots. I will start with Dr. Bariumunsi. I'll move on to Honorable Lydia Wanyoto. Then I'll move on to Honorable Rosemary. And then finally, I'll end with Honorable Dombo there. Your parting shots in 2 minutes, each of you.
It's each of you.
Thank you very much, Timothy. If you asked me why are we in Chankwanzi, my answer would be Ugandans, Ugandans, Ugandans. The theme of our retreat here in Chankwanzi is answering the citizens' call, improved service delivery for socio-economic transformation. So I just want to assure our viewers, listeners, and Ugandans out there that we are gathered here as leaders to reflect on the journey we have made since 2021, when the Ugandans voted us, and also be able to realign the forces of government to improve service delivery, because we voted because Ugandans want good roads, they want electricity, they want safe water, they want health care, they want education, they want to create wealth. And these are the issues which we are discussing, looking at the areas of progress, but also looking at the weaknesses and challenges with a view of improving and addressing these gaps so that we can continue to provide Ugandans with a good service. And at the end of the retreat, which we are closing on Saturday and then leave on Sunday, we shall come up with an outcome document detailing the resolutions and the way forward, which we shall communicate to Ugandans when we reach Kampala. Therefore, we are here as leaders on behalf of all of you Ugandans, and we are discussing how we can continue to address the quality of life and the welfare of Ugandans at large. Thank you very much for hosting us, and we thank UBC for this good show, and thank all the viewers and also the panelists here in Chankwanzi and also our friends in the studio in Kampala. Thank you very much.
Over to Honorable Lydia Wanyoto for her parting shots so that we can be able to move to the rest there. Your 2 minutes, Honorable Lydia.
Lydia.
Timothy, I did not participate in the 1980-1986 struggle. I was a young girl just beginning schooling, Today I'm here, and where you are, there is Dr. Chionga and the others. I want to inform Ugandans that 38 years down the road, we have a success story to talk about, and we must manage our success. We have a peaceful country. We have what you are calling young population. If you look at the parliamentary directory for this 11th parliament, over 75% of members of parliament are under the age of 40. We want to call upon them to rise to the occasion and provide leadership and make a contribution in their time. The legacy we are talking about today is the legacy of the Chiongas. But I would like to invite all Ugandans to look around and look at what are you doing for your country, because we have a peaceful country. We came away, we are now talking about a wish list of a 72 trillion budget, some of it borrowed money, others is our own revenue. What are you doing for your country as a Ugandan? We have energy, we have skills, and we can challenge. I would like to also challenge you, Timothy, and other media people, to invite people you are calling young, so that we engage, we listen to them. What is it do they want to do for the country? Because we have a liberalized media. The whole country is on our waves. Up to the last village, there is a local radio. Let's use this opportunity of liberalized media to campaign, to engage, and make a contribution to our country. We are managing a success story of a young population, of a peaceful country. Let's put our energy to make a contribution.
Thank you very much.
Museveni has made his contribution. Chionga has made his contribution. Babu, you have made your contribution. I call upon all other Ugandans to make their contribution, to rise to the occasion, to grow our country. I thank you.
Thank you very much. A very good call to action there. Over to Honorable Rosemary Namayanja there to give her parting shots. Her 2 minutes start now.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. As we celebrate the 38 years, we are also alive to the social, economic, and political terrain in the country, the changing dynamics. And as a party, we continue addressing those challenges as they come. And like we said, when Anyoto talked about a social contract with the people that we made in 2021, we are alive to it. And in that social contract, the issue that we raised was financial inclusion, was socio-economic transformation. Yes, we have made progress along the way, but we are now deepening that progress. And I want to say that the flagship project for our term this term, was the parish development model. When we talk about it, we are alive to the fact that right now as we speak, almost 2 million households have benefited from the parish development model. And 33% of the beneficiaries are below the age of 35 years. And this addresses the youth question. And when you say the 1 million shillings that people are talking about, that is small. Some of our young people need 400,000, 600,000, 800,000, 1 million shillings to be part of the national or the financial economy. So I just want to continue appealing to every one of us to be to engage actively, and our population to monitor and to participate actively in all government programs, so that which we committed to do, we actually do, and with the support of everyone. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Honorable Dombo Lumala, your parting shots in 2 minutes, please.
2 minutes, please.
I want to thank you very much, Timothy, and the management of UBC, which has enabled this program take place, and to enable this interactive discourse between us and the population, and between us with the team that is in Kampala in the studio. We should have been here with the Secretary General, the Right Honorable Richard Todwong, but because he lost his brother during the work in Somalia, and the body is arriving tomorrow, and we shall be burying him on Sunday. wish to commiserate with members of the family. But I know when he comes back, this is a journey we have started to explain to the people of Uganda what we have done in the last 38 years. And it is not stopping today. We are going to be on media houses, on UBC, every week to tell the people of Uganda the journey and how the story has been. But as I end, Uganda has got about 2 million elected leaders, from LOC 1 up to the level of the president. Why should the people of Uganda be fleeced when we have councillors who have been elected, when we have chairmen LOC 5 who have been elected, when we have chairmen LOC 3, we have members of parliament, and all these people are paid by government? Let these people go back to their areas and supervise the delivery of government programs. Members of parliament go to parliament and they earn money. Even those in the opposition, you have seen them when they have challenges, they earn money from government. They should come and support the programs of government. Members of parliament get their parish development model from parliament. The people of Uganda get parish development model from government. They should not mislead the people of Uganda. Whether you are a member of the opposition, whether you are a member of NRM, we all work to ensure that we survive, we are well off, in order to look after our families, our communities, and our country. Let the elected leaders provide leadership, supervise government programs, and explain government programs for the benefit of our people. I want to thank my colleagues, the panelists, both here in Chankwanzi and those in Kampala. We want to thank the participants of the program because they are watching us, and His Excellency the President for going to the bush to fight, to enable this that you are witnessing today to happen, to see the fruits of the people of Uganda. May God bless you, and good night.
Thank you very much. We switch from the panel in Chankwanzi back here to the studio, and I'll give parting shots to the team here. I'll start with Professor, Honorable Dr. Crispus Chionga, I'll go to Honorable Babu, and finally I'll end with Honorable Mukula there. Over to you, Professor.
Yes, thanks, Timothy. We've had a wonderful discussion of 2 hours plus. What we can say is that the NRM government has come a long way, and it has achieved much. But we also need to remember, as Honorable Mike Mukula guided us, we are not an island. We are working the NRM is working in a context of neoliberalism, it's working in a context of growing foreign debt, it's working in a context of increasing globalization and information sharing enabled by the internet. So what does this mean? Neoliberalism and debt has undermined the state's ability to invest in further development for the people, to grow their capabilities to survive and their capabilities to develop and become self-sufficient. Yet it is occurring in a context where people are informed of developments elsewhere in the world, such as the Gen Zs and in other parts of the world. So it should be a wake-up call for us and for those who lead us to manage the little resources we have prudently so that everyone is convinced that the government is trying its level best, so that in future we don't have the unfortunate scenarios that are playing out in other places. So let's maximize utility from the little that we have, because already things like foreign debt are working against us. And that way the NRM will achieve on its ideological disposition that it committed to 30 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Honorable Dr. Crispus Chionga.
Thank you, Timothy. My first point is to thank the President for articulating and recommitting his guidance of this country to fight corruption, because corruption is an obstruction to any form of development. But having said that, I think the central issue now is to grow the economy of Uganda and quickly. And this can be done because Uganda has resources, Uganda has people. The question is organization. I like the debate. The Secretary to the Treasury has projected that we can grow the economy to $500 billion in 17 years. The counter by the president is that it can be done in a much shorter time. And I want to associate myself with that counter by the president. But it requires organization, it requires mobilization, it requires consistency.
Thank you very much. Honorable Babu.
From there, I think one of the things that we've got to look at is His Excellency the President. He said we can go a little bit faster. To do that, you need a programmatic team. To do that, we need an administrative structure which is reasonable. We can't go on having 557 members of parliament. We can't go on having 80 members of cabinet. We can't have a civil service that is expensive to run. We need, therefore, to look at that very quickly, and as somebody said, so that we can catch up there. This, by the way, is part of corruption, is what creates corruption. And going all the way back, from the time we had the structural adjustment in this country, and the things that followed the structural adjustment, the weaknesses of our system, which has created this big thing to grow, called corruption. We must fight it right now. It is kicking our investment, it's kicking our foreign direct investment in this country, it's creating a problem with the foreign trade. For example, I'm told that our oil has arrived in Mombasa, and our brothers has put on a bond, which makes it even more expensive to bring the fuel here. So we need to find a relationship with our neighbors, as you called it, Pan-Africanism. And we need to sit down very quickly and have a mindset change. You need to ask His Excellency to get our people to understand that we need a particular team to be able to achieve what this country wants.
Thank you very much. Lastly, Honorable Captain Mike.
Let me thank my colleagues, first of all, for the very loud and clear messages they have passed, including the panelists in Chankwanzi. They've been very eloquent, very consistent, and the message is very clear. I would like to thank His Excellency the President for calling for this retreat. Unfortunately, we've not had time to do that because I have other assignments that I did communicate. What I want to say is that I again reiterate the position we had earlier, that these are what you call factors of economic evolution, social economic evolution. These issues that we are talking about there now were not there in the past. If they were there, they were the minimum. But because we are running on a constitution, and a constitution has now put us in a straitjacket, in that certain positions, even if you have to fight corruption, corruption is criminal. The constitution says, under the penal code, it must be proved beyond reasonable doubt. That's why you find that the president is fighting Article 23, that is the bail, to say that bail should not be granted to certain categories. That has not been heard because the Constitution has tied his hands. Now, I want you to capture this point. Point number two is that I think it is important, and I agree with Captain Babu and Dr. Kionga, to say that in order for us, Uganda, which has got 48% of East Africa's arable land, our comparative advantage is in agriculture. We need to maximize our capacity to produce, and I'm happy that the government has done very well. We have excess milk, we have excess sugar, we have excess beans, we have excess coffee. Uganda now is a very large exporter of coffee, and so on and so forth. Our main thing is the value addition. This value addition calls for us to create industry, to industrialize. Now, if you notice, the fundamentals that have created changes in the world, the global economy, have been, one, civilization. You talk about agrarian revolution, industrial revolution. You talk about the scientific revolution, now the ICT. This is what you call the the first and second or third revolution, industrial revolution. We now need to contextualize this in the African continent and be realistic about it. What am I saying? I think we now need to look at the value chain to create more jobs by industrialization. We need to look at widening the market. Uganda and President Museveni has been a champion in bringing in about East Africa's economic integration, then eventually political integration. Look at Congo. I've just been to Congo, and I've opened an office in Congo. They import eggs. They import beef from South America, Argentina, Mexico. They import most of the things from Europe. Here, because of the infrastructure, it takes you from Kisangani to Kinshasa by water 2 weeks for the ordinary person. The road between Kionga's area, his constituency, to Kisangani is close to nearly 800 kilometers, but it will take you almost 1 month on a rainy day. How then do you get your markets into this area? Kenya now has overtaken Uganda in terms of exports to Congo because of the network by air. I want to say that Uganda Airline is acquiring now a cargo plane. If you just destined your cargo plane into DRC Congo, Kinshasa, over 20 million people, they will take all our eggs, our beef, they will take our fruits, they will take everything that we produce in Uganda. Okay. What am I saying? In conclusion, I think I want to agree with the strategy that the president has put in to widen our markets. If Kenya closes our market to milk, Congo will take every liter that we produce here. I want to say, let's widen our market, let's broaden the economy, let's work hard and maintain the peace and stability. Our country has got a bright future. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me read brief messages here. Diana sends a message and says, ask them if UPE caters for the blind, deaf and dumb, because that's not a new issue and the teaching methods have been around for generations. In the name of equality, have there been any catered for in that direction? Okay. Ronald Mivule says, thank you for the show. The NRM has done well despite the few flaws here and there. However, what I demand of the president is the Federation of East Africa before he retires. This is Mivule Ronald, a regional integration activist. He continues and says, thank you, Timothy, for the show. I envisage a scenario in 2026 where the NRM will have 300 MPs, PLU will have 150, and NUP will have 30. What does such a situation mean for the opposition? Thank you very much, Ronald, for your messages. Quite interesting what you say. Gentlemen and lady, thank you very much. Team Chankwanzi, thank you very much for coming through. I will end it this way. Gandhi says, you must be the change you want to see. Good morning.
The National Resistance Movement emerged on Uganda's political scene after Obote's UPC second regime massively rigged the 1980s elections, which the Democratic Party was irrefutably projected to win. Yoweri Museveni declared war in a protest in 1981 in the jungles of Oluwero Triangle for 5 years, which later led to the defeat of Milton Obote and the military commission government led by General Tito Okello in January 1986.
Said, we know Obote is going to cheat. You DP, even if you win, you will not be in power. We are going to have a new method. We are going to the bush. So we had to put up that promise. And that turned out that there are two, that pronounced that there were only two serious politicians in Uganda. One Obote who said, even if I get the vote of my wife, I will rule. and he ruled. And the other one who said, if you cheat, I will go to the bush. And he went to the bush.
During the swearing-in ceremony on 29 January 1986, Museveni promised Ugandans a fundamental change.
Nobody will think that what is happening today what has been happening in the last 2 days is a mere change of guards. It's not a mere change of guards. I think this is a fundamental change.
His promise created a lot of expectations within the population that had gone through tough times of an unprecedented authoritarian rule characterized by institutional decay and political insecurity due to bad governance for close to 25 years from 1966 to 1986.
By fundamental change for Uganda, the president meant, the chairman, meant that Uganda now was going to be put on a progressive path. Instability was going to be behind us, and the country was going to have steady and progressive forward march.
To deal with the crisis NRM inherited, President Museveni and his new formed government adopted a number of measures which included establishment of a broad-based government encompassing all elements of the Uganda political spectrum.
In that first cabinet, you had the eminent people like the late Semogerere, the late Sebana Kizito, the late Mulenga. Those three people are mentioned. We are not part of the fight in the bush. They were mainly DP